Greetings. This is Rosalind Parks with National Network View News. Tonight, weekly contributor Brian E. Muhammad gives us insight on the damage left by Israeli airstrikes of the Palestinian occupied territories and the ongoing diplomatic and humanitarian efforts. Our news contributor, Vernon Muhammad, will also discuss cryptocurrency, finances, and building wealth. Before we get into the top news, let's do a recap on the current events we've recently covered. Yesterday, I spoke with weekly contributor Dr. Akili Muhammad on the recent lawsuit filed by employees at the Methodist Hospital in Houston, Texas, and its relation to violations of the Nuremberg Code. What is your view of the suit that the Methodist employees have pinned against their employer?
I noticed that there was an aura in Methodist that they considered themselves one of the best. And I would agree with that. They are probably one of the best in the medical center. But I'm saying that because the confidence in the aura that the employees of an institution have is a large part of the success of that institution. And I think it's very interesting that the pro-vaccine ideology calls everybody else, lead-headed. They're not open-minded. But in reality, if you have people that work in the healthcare field and have been doing so for many years, and there are a certain percentage right now, there are estimates from 50 to 60% of the healthcare workers across the country are either against or very concerned about getting the vaccine. Why would that not be taken in consideration?
The numbers of adverse reactions and deaths associated with the COVID-19 vaccines, along with the accuracy of the VAERS reporting system, also came up in conversation with Dr. Akili. Dr. Akili, what are your thoughts on the data that has been recently reported stating that 70% of Californians have had their first shot? And according to the CDC, 50% of Americans have been fully vaccinated.
When the vaccines were first being introduced to the society and when they were supposedly being made in these companies and they were about ready to be sent out to the public, there was a huge concern on how millions of people were going to get vaccinated. The system doesn't have the capability to do that. And so when we look at the fact that we have been vaccinating people since December, 50% of America is approximately 170 million people. And we have to understand that J&J was kind of behind the Moderna and the Pfizer. Mm-hmm. And then there was a period of time where they suspended it, right? So we're talking about a lot more people that are taking the vaccine that necessitate 2 shots. So we're really talking about a lot of manpower, a lot of vaccinations that it would take to vaccinate 170 people.
Dr. Akili addressed the concerns over the youth now being added to the COVID-19 vaccination trials and the risks of administering COVID-19 vaccines to children. Children as young as 6 months are being selected for COVID vaccination trials. Is this safe?
No, I don't think so. I don't think there has been enough time for us to truly understand and come to a conclusion on what's happening in adults. And of course, as most people have seen within this last month, it's been approved for, 12 to 15 year range. So for them to already have dropped the number to 6 months, and then again, it hasn't been approved yet for approval, it's still in the emergency use phase. It just really doesn't make a lot of sense to me because the generation that's lower than 15 didn't really have a lot of cases. It really wasn't a large population that was having a lot of struggles with the COVID infection.
On a special broadcast, NNV News anchor Willie Muhammad highlighted the 64 years of the ministry of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. Student Minister Demetric Muhammad, a member of NOI's research team, discussed the milestone and helped highlight the impact the minister has made throughout the years.
So, Brother Dimitri, it was actually you who brought this idea to me to have this show, and you, from your research, discovered this is the 64th anniversary of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan being a minister. So, why is it significant for us to highlight this milestone in his life?
Minister Willie, I think that this is a great occasion for us in the Nation of Islam and as a people. For when you go throughout Black America, quite frankly, the world, all you have to do is say two words, the minister, and one man comes to mind. And that is, of course, our beloved teacher, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. So he has worn a moniker or a title for 64 years. And that is a word that defines a servant. Some dictionaries say a minister is a servant to a king.
Social media strategist for the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, Vernon Muhammad, spoke on how the trials the minister overcame throughout the years helped to shape his ministry, as well as the reach his ministry has had around the world within the social media era, and much, much more with Willie Muhammad.
How have the trials of Minister Farrakhan helped to shape his ministry?
You know, the minister was asked that question via Twitter, and he said it helped to build his character. And the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad told him that he would never teach another minister like he taught Brother Malcolm until he has thoroughly tried him. So when you look at how the minister was tried and tested, and the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad told him, you know, during a very heated moment, I believe it was December 1974, when he told him, he said, brother, when you want to test the strength of a board, you put it at the corner and put a lot of pressure on it. And if it breaks, you throw it away and then find you another one. So at every turn, the messenger was letting them know that he was being tested, because the messenger in 1954 had prayed for a little help.
Student Minister Nuri Muhammad discussed the correlation between the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan's life and that of King David and Apostle Paul. He also touched on the impact that his wife, Mother Khadijah Farrakhan, the wife of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad, and his mother have had on him.
How would you say that his wife, Mother Khadijah Farrakhan, and his mother have impacted and shaped the 64-year ministry of our minister, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan?
Wow. Simply put, the minister called Mother Khadijah the wind beneath his wings. Wow. And when he said it, I've heard him say it 4 times. And I thought about that, Brother Willie. I thought about that verse in the Holy Quran where Allah talks about what happens to a brother or sister when they meet the truth from the Messiah. And in the Nuruddin translation, it says that you are taught the Torah, the gospel. You're taught the book and the wisdom. You're taught what foods to eat. And it says in the Nuruddin, and you put on wings and become a flyer.
Historian and NOI archivist, Student Minister Carlos Muhammad broke down the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan's tireless teaching that cemented his position in the hearts of the Black community and the influence Malcolm X had on his ministry.
What is it about the ministry of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan that continues to cement his position in the heart of the Black community as it took place also in New York during that time?
When we look at 1970s Harlem, we're talking about the Mecca of Black America at that time in New York City. But we were also at the height of the opioid or heroin epidemic, or cities like York, Philadelphia, Baltimore, all up down the East Coast and throughout the country, but specifically in Harlem. And so in the midst of that type of situation, where the scourge of heroin was so heavy, but yet the message of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad coming from his national representative, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, was transforming the lives of those.
NNV News anchor Naya Tai filled in for Robert Muhammad and spoke with guest Sabira Muhammad, a literacy education specialist, about the essentials of literacy and the benefits of tutoring and literacy resources.
What motivated you to become a literacy education specialist?
Well, I am a 10-year educator and I have worked in K through 12. And unfortunately, I have worked with students in the upper grades who were considered non-readers, which is absolutely heartbreaking. And I believe, and we know, that literacy is a human right. Being able to read and express yourself and gain knowledge is absolutely a human right. So I decided once I had children and experienced success with, developing those skills with my daughter, that I would create a place where others can gain resources to build that skill of being able to read and comprehend and write. And so thus emerged Endurance Literacy Center.
NNV Weekly contributor Charles Muhammad spoke with Naya and provided tips on how to eat to live to possibly sustain life for up to 1,000 years.
So where is the science that backs up what Mr. Muhammad taught?
Well, we could go, I don't know if Barnes and Nobles are around anymore, but they have lots of books on the subject of living long. Now, there's a book, Lifespan, Why We Age and Why We Don't Have to. These books go into the root of aging and getting older, or the body suffering from diseases and sicknesses. And it's on a cellular level. And you can see the multitude of cells that are in the body that need certain vitamins and nutrients and other, even sunlight, proper water. And that comes from our food. So if you eat the right foods, you will continue to give the body what it needs to rebuild itself. Because now they are not hiding the science anymore. They're helping the Elijah Muhammad, proving that the body can rebuild itself and rebuild itself to be just like it is when you were a young 16-year-old.
Anchor Tariq X was joined by weekly contributor Nina Shabazz to discuss her research on historically Black beaches and the importance of reviving the history and importance of Black landmarks.
I would have to say Highland Beach is a historically Black beach, correct?
It is. Highland Beach is in Maryland, and it was actually designed and built by Frederick Douglass and his son. And so there's a particular part, there's a landing on the second floor that leads from the bedroom. And I took some photos from the front porch, but the landing, they turned the house into a museum, but the landing, it overlooks the eastern shore. And so there's a plaque that shows basically Frederick Douglass wanting to see the eastern shore where he was once a slave, but now he's a free man and he stood on his own beach. So I thought that was pretty epic that, he, so much that he did, and, now he owned a beach. So that was pretty significant for me.
Let's pause for announcements from our sponsors. When we return, NNV Weekly contributor Brian Muhammad will return to give us insight on the current situation of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. We'll be right back.
Be a part of the force that powers truth in journalism. Your support helps us to highlight solutions for a brighter tomorrow. Go to nnvnews.com/donate.
Asiatic Minds, online education, helping our children to discover their God-given skills, gifts, talents, and passion that will allow them to see their greatness, as well as the greatness of our people, and upon discovering that greatness, infusing them with the desire to use it for the betterment of themselves, their families, our people, and the world. Call now, 502-219-4848.
This is Sister Sajda Muhammad. We are proud to announce that the Sajda House commemorative Elijah coins are finally here. This priceless heirloom, made from recycled copper from the messenger's home, is now available at sajdahouse.com.
The hashtag Bank Black social media campaign made strides not only in revolutionizing how we bank, but also how we think. The movement inspired thousands of African Americans across the country to transfer or deposit millions of dollars into Black-owned banks. These are banks that will invest in urban communities, employ African Americans, support Black businesses, and inspire Black home ownership. This is a very proud moment for our culture as we are taking small, but significant, steps towards building Black power through Black wealth.
Thank you for tuning in to NNV News. Please share your thoughts with us in the comments section below. Follow us on social media at NNV News, and please subscribe to our YouTube channel, National Network View. This is Clifton Muhammad with NNVnews.com.
As a fragile ceasefire continues to hold, Israeli airstrikes of the Palestinian-occupied territories reveal catastrophic damage and destruction.
The ceasefire has allowed a more detailed examination of the damage that's caused in Gaza. The NGO Global Wash Cluster says the power supply to a desalination plant has been cut as a result of the bombings conducted by Israel. It means that nearly 1 million people have little or no access to clean water. The Hamas media office says around 120,000 people have lost their homes, with more than half of them seeking shelter in Gaza's UN-administered schools. 51 education facilities, including 46 schools, are damaged. They've all been shut, and students don't yet have access to distance learning. The Israeli bombardment has also damaged 18 healthcare facilities, including the city's only COVID-19 testing facility. Gazan officials say $80 million worth of damage has been done to local businesses and factories.
Joining us to give us insight on this topic is Global View contributor Brian E. Muhammad. Greetings, sir.
Greetings, Sister Rosalind. Good to be back.
Yes. After 11 days of Israeli airstrikes and bombardment, the Palestinian occupied territories, including the West Bank and Gaza, have been decimated. What types of infrastructures have been damaged or destroyed by the airstrikes?
Well, I mean, all civilian infrastructure. We're talking hospitals, schools, Palestinian residences, businesses, and even the offices, which usually the media is off limits to these things, but the offices of Al Jazeera, as well as the Associated Press, were destroyed.
How long would you say it will take to rebuild after such a catastrophic destruction?
Well, according to many of the analysts who are doing these assessments afterwards and looking at the level of destruction, they're saying it's going to take literally years, for these things to be rebuilt and for the city to come back, the cities to come back.
Now, the U.S. has pledged $75 million in U.S. development and economic aid in Palestine, $35 million to the UN for Palestinians, and $5.5 million in immediate disaster relief. Why is funding so lopsided with only the $5.5 million going to disaster relief for the Palestinians?
Well, all of it is peanuts. All of it is little to nothing really compared to the annual nearly $4 billion. And then when you add on other things and loans and different things that Israel gets from the United States taxpayer dollars, it can go up to $5 billion. So we start talking about, millions, whether it's 3 million or 100 million. It's peanuts compared to what it does for the Zionist state of Israel.
Now, who is in control of these funds? And is there any guarantee that these funds will actually go to benefit the Palestinian people?
Well, the Palestinian Authority, according to them, they're in charge. The Palestinian Authority is the group that is internationally recognized as the legitimate governing body of the Palestinians. But of course, you have the group Hamas, who's a resistance group that is in control of the Gaza Strip. And they're saying that, you know, they will allocate the money in their areas under the auspices of a new national council that they put together in partnership with donors, both private and government donors. So it's a definite disagreement between the Hamas and the Palestinian Authority. What are the guarantees that it will go to the people? Well, in this type of situation, there is no guarantees. You know, we know that the United States and outside countries like that prefer to deal with the Palestinian Authority. You know, but again, it remains to be seen how this money will be handled moving forward.
Right. Now, did Israel deliberately engage in war crimes and crimes against humanity by targeting the vital utilities and infrastructure of the Palestinian people?
Well, I think I would say it like this, Sister Rosalind, that nobody will admit that they do crimes against humanity on purpose. But when you look at the lopsided way that the occupying forces of Israel deals with the Palestinians in their land, it is obvious that the Israeli government have no regard for human rights laws, you know, international law. You know, you look at the fact that they're saying they started bombing like this because Hamas shelled rockets into Israel. You know, while you look at the numbers, only 12 Israelis died, one military person, according to the reports.
Right.
12 people. But look at the amount of bombing and damage that the occupying forces did to the Gaza Strip, the West Bank, and other Palestinian areas. Nearly 300 people, Palestinian men, women, and children died versus the 12 Israelis. So if you're bombing as a retaliation for something that Hamas did, the question is, well, what kind of bomb did Hamas use if it only killed 12 people? You see, versus your damage of 300 and then the thousands who are injured, and then all of the infrastructure that was damaged. Now, you look at the infrastructure, my sister, a lot of that bombing is against international law. You cannot interfere and poison the water systems. You cannot do these things according to international law, but Israel does this each time one of these skirmishes pop off there in the occupied territories with them. Israel goes beyond the limits.
Now, does the U.S. have a greater obligation than other nations to fund the rebuilding of Palestine as it has funded Israeli aggression, war crimes, and these crimes against humanity?
The United States is part and parcel of the war crimes and the crimes against humanity, that it funds these crimes against humanity. Again, the amount of foreign aid that it gives Israel every year without fail, it doesn't even use it as leverage against them when they do these atrocities. So yes, the United States does have a greater responsibility because it is the greatest benefactor of the Zionist state of Israel and the maiming of the Palestinian, the killing of the Palestinian people. So yes, I believe that the United States has a particular responsibility where this is concerned.
What humanitarian efforts are underway to address the horrific current conditions that the Palestinian people are now living in?
Well, you know, the United Nations humanitarian body for Palestine has been on the ground pleading with the world community to not just fund, but to also intervene politically in solving this 73-year-old problem of injustice against the Palestinian people. So there are things that are going on all the time, but this is nothing new. This has happened before. So it's just a repeat of the same thing. In 2012, when they had the Gaza, what they call the Gaza war, and over 1,000 people were killed. Again, mostly civilian Palestinians were murdered at the hands of the so-called defense forces of Israel. You know, it happened in 2002 when Ariel, I think his first name was Ariel, but Sharon, who was the prime minister, desecrated the Al-Aqsa Mosque in 2002, the same way that was done recently that helped to jump this current problem off. But the world community, it shouts, it passes resolutions at the UN. America does this thing by giving political cover to Israel and blocks the implementation of anything that of accountability. It blocks it. So it's the same thing over and over and over again.
Now, speaking of humanitarian, as this humanitarian crisis is bringing greater attention to the plight of the Palestinians, how have other places in the world shown their solidarity and support of Palestine?
You know, it's been overwhelming.
Mm-hmm.
It's been overwhelming, even though, again, this is a repeat of history and it happens over and over again. This time, the world community, people rose up in capitals in over nearly 100 cities here in the United States, in London, in different parts of Africa even, you know, other parts of the Middle East, holding their governments accountable for dropping the ball on the Palestinian struggle. So there has been an overwhelming response now throughout the world. And there's even where some people are even saying that there's a tide being turned, you know, whereas here, whenever these things jump off, there are certain groups and organizations, human rights and anti-war organizations that tend to go and galvanize the people and march in Washington and march in different cities.
Right.
But it was actually the people who was responding even before these organizations, you know, were really responding and calling them out. So there's a change going on. I believe that it's really the spirit of Allah, because the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan have said that we're living at a time of a increase in justice among the people to get justice for themselves. And you see the people, he called it a universal outcry of justice, intensifying universal outcry of justice. So now there's something in the people who is rising up against tyranny, rising up against oppression, rising up against persecution. And now you saw here last year with the killing of George Floyd.
Right.
Look at the response around the world. Nobody called for that. It was the energy of the people. See? So we believe the Spirit of God is moving in the people against these recalcitrant governments of oppression. And their day is up now, and it's moving in the people.
It is. Now, Brother Brian, I want you to hold that thought. We're going to pause for announcements from our sponsors. And coming up next, we'll have more with Brother Vernon Muhammad on the conflict in the Middle East. We'll be right back.
Be a part of the force that powers truth in journalism. Go to nnvnews.com/donate.
worldwide, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Download the Final Call Radio app and take us everywhere. On your phone, on your computer, on your tablet, on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. You can also log on to finalcall.com and click the Listen Live button, or finalcallradio.com. Final Call Radio, the official voice of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan and the Nation of Islam.
Please share your thoughts with us in the comment section below. Follow us on social media at NNV News, and please subscribe to our YouTube channel at National Network View. I am Anissa Muhammad with NNVnews.com.
Thank you, Brother Brian, for staying on with us. Nearly 300 Palestinians have been killed, as we discussed briefly in the last segment, and a dozen Israelis killed. Why is the death toll so unequal?
Because Israel have been given the weapons of America. Israel also have devalued Palestinian life. And when you have no value for the next human being, then you will stop at nothing. You don't care about the numbers. You don't care about the lopsidedness of how you respond. You know, in Islam, we don't believe in just turning the other cheek. The Holy Quran allowed for retaliation under circumstances. But the Holy Quran also balances that by not allowing us to exceed the limits, even in warfare. So if you kill 10 of mine, I'm not allowed to kill 30 of yours. We don't do that. But the Israelis, these occupying forces, have done this throughout its, again, over 7 decades of persecution of the Palestinian people. It has always been a lopsided response. So you see this level of killing because they have devalued the Palestinians and don't look at them as human beings. They don't look at them as themselves. So it's easy to destroy what benefits the Palestinians in terms of infrastructure. It's easy to displace, the UN is saying 91,000, but there are others who are saying it's well over 120,000 who have been displaced just in this last month. And so you will not do that if you had any respect for human life, even in the case of so-called warfare.
Right. Now, we're talking about this. You just mentioned displacement. Why has Israel limited the growth of Palestinian neighborhoods? In addition to the conflict and the airstrikes, prior to this, Palestinians were being evicted from their homes. The most recent evictions occurring in the East Jerusalem neighborhood of Sheikh Jarrah. Why is this happening in the Palestinian neighborhoods at this time?
Because the so-called Jews there were planted there by the United States and the United Nations and Britain. Back then it was called the League of Nations in 1948. So their whole agenda is the usurping of land that do not belong to them. So they take the land, and they don't just take it, but they persecute the people, you know. So all of this is backed by this mandate given to them. These are Zionist Europeans. These aren't even the true Jews. These are people who converted to Judaism fairly recently. These aren't what you call the true Jews. These are not even Semitic people, which makes it a misnomer whenever they cry out anti-Semitism for anybody who will raise their voices against this kind of injustice.
Right.
So they do this because they want to depopulate the Palestinian people and repopulate it with themselves. And this is why you see these illegal annexing going on. Now, there is a recognition that Israel, these so-called Israelis, are a occupying force. And which with that is there are certain international laws that rule an occupying nation. And Israel breaks every one of them in its annexing and stealing of people's land and properties even to this day. When I was there many years ago with the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan on his World Friendship Tour, and you drove through that area and you see even some of the houses up on these beautiful hills that the so-called Jews took from the Palestinians. And meanwhile, the families who maybe lived in those homes are now living almost in tent-like existences just at the bottom of some of these same hills.
Right.
It's an apartheid system that the occupiers have in terms of how they rule the Palestinians, and this is why you see what was taking place in East Jerusalem. And then the United States under President Trump,
yes.
When he moved the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem and recognized Jerusalem as the undivided capital of Israel, that gave the green light for the Israelis to really go like it's no tomorrow to take the lands that is in East Jerusalem, which is an unfair situation and an illegal situation because that neighborhood that you named,
yes,
those Palestinians are actually refugees who fall under the laws of refugees, international laws pertaining to refugees. These people got that land, got that neighborhood when they were displaced in the mid-1950s as a result of what was taking place back then in terms of displacement of Palestinians. So for them to go in and take that from them, again, not only is it uncouth, but it's against international law that governs refugees.
Now, you did mention someone that we don't hear about much in the news at this time, but U.S. President Biden and Vice President Harris pledged their unwavering support for Israel during their campaign. Will the Biden administration break that pledge and stop providing monetary aid and military weapons to Israel? And what is the difference between the current policy toward Israel and that of former President Trump?
Well, I'll answer the last question first. There is no difference.
Okay.
Israel enjoys the bipartisan support of both Republicans and Democrats. It makes no difference. They all have one agreement where Israel is concerned, and that is to support Israel no matter what, even if it's, again, waxes against international law and crimes against humanity. They will not stop giving to Israel. They will not hold back on the aid that they give to Israel. Israel enjoys about 3/4 or about a third, it may be, of the total U.S. budget for global aid to nations. It enjoys the largest amount of any nation on the earth, even though Israel really, it can stand on its own as a nation in terms of wealth today. So no, I don't care who it is, Biden, Harris, they all are sycophants to the Jewish question and they will never stop giving to Israel. And that means that they will always be on the wrong side of freedom, justice, and equality for the Palestinian and freedom-loving people worldwide. I don't care who it is. They can talk that, but they don't have the political will. And even though he did not want to get involved with this Palestinian question, it was this situation that took place last month that drew Biden back in, because he was going to leave it alone. He really wants to deal with his issue with China. That's where he really wants to be.
Okay.
But this thing is too big and too strong, and it keeps sucking them. It will continue to suck him back in. And even if he made a move and a pivot, the support will always be there. The money will always flow.
Now, is Israel signaling a return to military force, similar to what we've seen in the past with previous Palestinian leaders?
Sure, it never ended. It never ended. You know, they are, again, a heavy-handed rule when it comes to the Palestinian people, you know? So it never ended. It will always be this hard-nosed kind of situation. And they're so bold. They're so bold that even in the bombs that they dropped, the missiles that they shot last month, Gantz, I think his first name is Ben, something like that. Gantz, the defense minister for Israel, will be in the United States tomorrow to negotiate and ask for a replenishment, a replacement of the bomb that they dropped that killed those almost 300 Palestinians last month. Now, how bold is that? They don't give a damn about human life. They will, and they know that America will not say no. They will not say no, but we will see. Again, the tide is turning in the streets, but whether or not that will remain strong enough to push the Biden administration or whoever even will come after him in years to come to really change its policy on Israel, it remains to be seen.
Thank you, Brother Brian, for joining us and staying on to answer all of our questions about what is going on with the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. We look forward to seeing you again next week.
Likewise. Thank you, Sister Rosalind.
Thank you. Let's pause for announcements from our sponsors. After the break, Vernon Muhammad will discuss cryptocurrency and the importance of finances and building wealth. We'll be right back.
Be a part of the force that powers truth in journalism. Your support helps to combat false media. Cash App, NNV News.
Asiatic Minds, online education, helping our children to discover their God-given skills, gifts, talents, and passion that will allow them to see their greatness as well as the greatness of our people. And upon discovering that greatness, infusing them with the desire to use it for the betterment of themselves, their families, our people, and the world. Classes begin September 1st. To enroll, visit AsiaticMinds.com.
This is Sister Sajda Muhammad. We are proud to announce that the Sajda House commemorative Elijah coins are finally here. This priceless heirloom, made from recycled copper from the messenger's home, is now available at sajdahouse.com.
Greetings from National Network View. This week's Final Call cover story headline reads, "The battle in the sky is near." For 90 years, the Nation of Islam was mocked and ridiculed for its teachings on the mother plane and its aim and purpose. Now the government admits these UFOs are real, vindicating what the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad and the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan has warned of and prophesied. This FCM volume number 35 edition middle page article is a message by the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan entitled "The Will, the Great Mother Plane, the Power of the Will to Destroy." To read more, subscribe to finalcalldigital.com and tune in to the all-new Final Call Radio. This is the nnvnews.com Final Call Cover Report.
Please make sure you leave your comments and questions in the comment section below. Follow us on Facebook, National Network View, and make sure to check us out on Twitter as well, National Network View. This is Sergio Gutierrez with National Network View, signing off.
As movements in the financial market continue and people move away from their dollar dependence, it's important to secure assets and be your own bank.
The problem with the U.S. and its saving current account and balances is that they were already setting us up for a problem before the pandemic hit. The net national savings rate, which is the broadest measure of domestic saving, it's the savings of businesses, households, and the government sector adjusted for depreciation, was at 1.4% of national income in the first quarter of 2020. And the average, 45-year average from 1960 to 2005 was 7. So we were at the lower end of an acceptable bound. And then, we have introduced this massive relief package, which is going to blow our budget deficits higher than we've ever seen and take debt to GDP ratios well above those which were evident in the end of World War II.
Joining us to discuss more on this is Vernon Muhammad. Greetings, sir.
Greetings. Thank you for having me.
Yes, sir. What is new on the blockchain?
There has been a lot going on over the last couple of weeks. Mm-hmm. Everyone knows that there was a lot of volatility, uncertainty. People have watched the price points of various cryptocurrencies drop dramatically, as well as other markets too. You're watching the stock market, and it's not just happening in America, but there's something big going on. You've heard the term wealth transfer. Well, we're starting to see it. Money is moving, and this is happening all around the globe. So the goal for many people who are listening and who are learning along with us should be to find out how to properly position ourselves so that we don't get left behind or disenfranchised. And so we can capture some of that money that's in motion.
Mm. And what do these movements mean for the existing global financial systems?
What we see going on in several different areas, you see a shift. You think of America and how much of a powerhouse it has been over the years. Well, there's a struggle for dominance now. If you look at China, if you look at the European Union, you look at some other developing nations, everyone is realizing that, hey, since 1971 at least, we've been dependent on the US dollar. What you're starting to see now is different countries are starting to maneuver themselves so that they can establish their own dominance. And as things move from just the physical US dollar to digital currency, you have more people taking advantage. You have more nations and institutions taking advantage of blockchain, taking advantage of Bitcoin, Ethereum, as well as, like China is doing, their own central bank issued digital currency.
Now, with the Federal Reserve and the banks here in the U.S., can you tell us a little bit about what you are seeing from those entities?
Yes. Now, this is okay. I'm gonna try to go slow here, right? This,
okay.
This is financial education 101. The banks and the banks for the longest time have been set up to, for lack of a better term, to profit off of the people. Okay, I can't think of a better way to put that right now. But we put our money in the banks, and the banks use our money to lend out to make more money. And for the money we put there, they'll throw us a little bit of throw us a bone. You might put $100 in the bank, and after a year's time, you think, okay, well, surely that $100 has grown, but you end up making 0.01%. So at the end of the year, you have $100 and 1 penny. Right. You know, so the figures go like that. But there's a shell game going on that the average person just isn't even aware of, how money moves back and forth between banks, between different institutions, insurance companies. Just think of the term floating checks. Okay. If you know what a floating check is and you know how bad it is to float a check,
yes,
that's what's going on. Over there, there's what's called the repo market or repurchase market, where banks and these institutions, at the end of the night, they have to settle their books. They have to balance everything out. And if something is off, bank A just goes to bank B and says, hey, let me borrow this amount until tomorrow morning. And, you know, we'll do that. Well, that's just like, you know, somebody who knew that they were supposed to get their paycheck on Saturday, but it's Friday and they need to make some transactions. So they just go ahead and write that check and nobody is the wiser on Monday morning. Well, that's what's going on a very grand scale. And if the average person doesn't wise up and get into a proper position, a lot of people are going to be crushed.
Now, what is the tokenization of assets?
One of my favorite subjects. That's the assets. I think the last time I was here, I talked about the significance of assets and liabilities. Assets are the things you own that put money into your pocket or put money into your account or make money for you. And liabilities are things that just cost you money. And an example of that I used is a house. I think I used the example last time of a house. You know, you live in a house, you pay the rent, you pay the mortgage on a house, whatever. That's a liability. But if you have a house that you can turn into an Airbnb, or you can have a basement, you can rent that out to a tenant, then that asset, that becomes an asset because it's bringing income as opposed to just money going out. So tokenization of assets comes into play with so many of these things that we would invest in. Let's say real estate, let's say gold, precious metals, gems, anything that people would normally utilize to store or build wealth that may have been out of reach for the average person. As they relate to the blockchain, they're tokenized. So they're broken into fractional parts. They're broken into affordable portions where people can actually buy a piece of this asset that actually turns around and makes money for them. So this is going on, and this is being implemented in different parts of the world as it relates to real estate, as it relates to business, as it relates to NFTs and art, collectible items, things of that nature.
Okay. Now, as we move away from the dollar dependence, I know you mentioned some of the other countries are mobilizing to move away from it. What value or what has value in cryptocurrency?
There's a saying that I like to use is what has value in crypto. Okay. So if you think about, go back to the dollar dependence, okay, we used to be able to equate this house costs this many dollars, or there are certain countries that produce oil, and for however many barrels of oil, it immediately was translated into this many dollars. Well, what's actually going on now in different countries, there are places where the dollar is not accepted. So you can go there with your $1 million and think that, oh, I'm going to do this. They'll say, no. Exchange that into the particular currency that they want. They could say gold, they could say Bitcoin, or just like China, they could say, no, you need to turn that into our digital yuan now. So what has value is no longer valued in, oh, this is worth so many dollars. Soon it's going to be, this is worth so many items of Bitcoin or so many items of this cryptocurrency or whatever the other asset is.
Now, can you give us information about the use case of the the blockchain in Dubai?
Sure. There's a project that's going on now. It's called the J1. Okay. And if you know anything about Dubai, you may have heard about the Burj Khalifa, the world's tallest building. Dubai has become a major financial and business center in the world. And ultra wealthy people are going there and using that, setting that up as their base of operations. Well, this particular project called the J1 is Canal Front Business District Real Estate that is actually being valued in cryptocurrency. It's being valued and business is being conducted on the G999 blockchain. So again, what has value is valued in crypto. You're not going to be able to go there and say, okay, I'll buy a unit in this luxury apartment building in dollars. They'll say, well, you need to exchange that into G999 or the J1 token to make that transaction work. And things like that are going to happen more and more and more.
Okay. Now, your specialty, financial education. Can you talk to us a little bit about being your own bank and securing your assets?
Sure. This is the practical part, I guess. All right. Yeah. Financial education. Be your own bank. Understand, first of all, like I started with, the banks as we know them, that we've become dependent on, make the money off of us. Okay. They're set up so that as we place our money there for them to hold, they capitalize, they gain off of it. All of the wealth, all of the growth flows in that direction. But it's very necessary that we start to think about things a little differently and ask ourselves the question, how can I position myself so that instead of all the money flowing out from me, I have money flowing back into me? We got to start thinking in terms of building that generational wealth. What am I doing for, the people who are coming on behind me, and where I've been redlined, or where we've seen just this past weekend, what's happening with Black Wall Street, Tulsa, Oklahoma? How do we prevent that from ever happening again? And that's one promise that the blockchain holds.
Okay. Now, before we close out, I want to make sure that we highlight this. Tonight, you have a tutorial that will be taking place at 7:30 p.m. Eastern. Can you give us the information on how to watch that, or where to go to watch that?
That's going to be a Zoom. That's going to be on the Zoom platform. The information is there on the screen. But if you go to my social media platforms, if you go to The High Road on Twitter, or if you go to Vernon Muhammad on Facebook, that should be the first post that you see. You have all the information there. It's open to everyone, so you can spread the word. If you're tired of being in the rat race and you are looking for a better way, this is going to be for you.
Yes. Thank you so much, Vernon Muhammad, for joining us again. And I look forward to hearing more about what's going on the blockchain. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us today and tuning into National Network View News. Please share your thoughts with us in the comment section below and follow us on social media at NNV News. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel, NNV News. This is Rosalind Parks for National Network View News. Good night.
Be a part of the force that powers truth in journalism. Go to nnvnews.com/donate.